Hi, I'm Peter Nichols, Life Enjoyment Mentor. My business is enjoyment, my product is purpose. I help people connect with what they enjoy in their lives with what gives them purpose, at work, home and in community life. When you lose yourself in what you do, you enjoy, you find yourself. The real you comes alive. Typically in our early working years we focus on earning the money we need to establish ourselves and our families in life. I believe the second half of life is the richer half. Only when we have reasonably experienced adult life do we start to understand what makes us different as a person, what we are good at and what people value about us. We are ready to find our true north, serving causes that give us satisfaction and answer the question, why are you here? This is one of a series of interviews of people who explored their true potential, have seen the light and made significant and purposeful changes to enjoy a more satisfying life. Hi, I'm Peter Nichols, Life Enjoyment Mentor. My business is enjoyment, my product is purpose. When you lose yourself in an interest you love, you find yourself. The real you comes to life. And this is the second in a series of interviews on the topic of, is the second half of life the better half of life? And I'm really pleased and privileged to have as my guest today, Sally A. Curtis, very dear friend of mine from a long time ago, from way back to National Speakers Association many years ago. And Sally has got already got some global awards, so she's got plenty of depth in her life that I'd like to explore. But first, a little bit about Sally. Sally is a content creator and repurposing specialist. Sally is best known for transforming books into 2 years' worth of dynamic visual content for her clients. She officially describes herself in business as the feisty, bite-sized content crusader. But Sally's story starts with self-development, and from something Sally said the other day, it began when she was 11. In her 20s, it was a chance glimpse into a network marketing company that ignited Sally's passion for lifelong learning and strong connection to people and their stories. She was soon approached by several of Australia's most influential business leaders and swiftly scouted to head up business development, filling rooms with thousands of aspiring entrepreneurs at some of the biggest industry events around the country. She became known as the Bums on Seats lady. She soon found herself on stage speaking to packed audiences around the country, sharing her secrets and strategies. But it was an offhand comment that gifted Sally her watershed moment. For God's sake, Sally, you've got enough content to write a book. Sally promptly transformed a 45-minute presentation and the training workbook into 2 books, and later, with this insight, the Sally A. Curtis bite-sized content brand was born. Recently, Sally decided she wanted to give back to a community that supported her during a difficult period in her life. She has partnered with Homes for Homes, created by The Big Issue, to help others get back on their feet. In 2023, Sally was voted in the best 20 Australian female podcasters as the host of her weekly Success Secrets Exposed series, and is now ranked number 7. In 2023 and 2024, she was the winner of Australian Marketing Consultant of the Year by Prestige Awards. And finally, Sally was a Global Women of Influence Award winner in 2024. Personally and professionally, Sally is quirky, outside of the box, caringly passionate, though bossy, and fun. With a love of nature, where she walks her dog, beloved dog Honey. Her spirit animal, ferrets. And yes, she did indeed used to race ferrets. Sally is a proud single mother to an extraordinary 21-year-old son. While much younger than me, Sally has been my marketing mentor over recent years now, and yes, bossy. Sally, it's not just a pleasure to have you on, it's an honour and a privilege. Thank you for agreeing to come onto the show.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you very much for that introduction. I feel old and accomplished at the same time. So thank you very, very much. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be able to share some of my insights about life.
And, I'd like to pick up on those awards you got. Clearly, you've got a lot of depth in your life now. And I guess I'd be interested to hear a bit of your backstory about how you've come to gradually I think one of my sayings, we measure age in years, we measure growth in depth. You have incredible depth now in your life. Tell us something of your backstory that you think has brought you to that point.
I think the backstory in itself is incredibly detailed. So I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, e.g., I've always had that freedom spirit, which is obviously why I like the ferrets and their quirky personalities that they have. So I've had a side hustle of one form or another since I was 11. I've had horses when I was younger, so I did riding lessons. I was a makeup artist in my youth, so I did wedding makeups. I've always had some form of a side hustle and a version of giving back. But I think the depth for me really comes from the ability to look back and join the dots, and the ability to unpack your own insights. Now, I say it that way because in amongst that book writing process, and it's very easy to write a book when someone writes it from your own content and repurposes it for you, which is where I understood the repurposing element. But when I was working with one of my mentors, and I was wanting to create my very first presentation before I started actually speaking on stage, I went to one of his boot camps, which was an unpacking boot camp. To craft your story. Well, to say that I was in fetal position and in tears for most of those 2 days was an understatement, because I knew what I knew so well, but I didn't know how to articulate it. Therefore, I found it very difficult to pull it out of my brain, and even more difficult to write, because I can clearly speak, but I do not find writing and did not find writing enjoyable in any way, shape, or form. So I left that training in a crumpled mess, defeated. But the feisty ferret rises, and I then redid and resat that course a number of months later, and really got to appreciate the ability to be able to ask yourself questions. What does that really mean to me? What are the levels of that? And it can be just a word. Back then, it was the word influence. What does influence mean to me? Well, influence in marketing is all sorts of different things. So, what does that really mean to me? What are my natural steps that I take when I mean that? So there was a series of questions that I learnt and became very comfortable with, of asking myself, being able and having the ability to unpack my ideas and my insights. And then through that unpacking process, I also was able to look back and join the dots and see where one a learning led to the next learning, led to the next learning. And I've always loved Steve Jobs, and he talks about looking back to look forward. And I've very much done that in my life. I've looked back, joined the dots, and gone, okay, well, I can take it in that direction now. So I've been a lover of I am now. I wasn't at the time, of unpacking. Looking back, stopping to look forward, to grow and see what's next, and what's the most logical, intuitive, leverageable opportunity that's next.
I like this, this looking back and joining the dots. And given we're talking about, our advances in life, I guess it's interesting. Have been lots of little dots, or 2 or 3 very big dots, or what do you reckon where the big shift happened?
Yeah, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of little dots. Over Christmas, I was actually redoing one of my bonsais. So I've got a very large bonsai that's got a very big tree in it. And I was actually redoing the stonework on it, because it's got a creek in it, and it's got a pond, and it's got a little man that sits on it fishing. But around that was all of the rocks and things had sort of all got in the dirt, and it wasn't pretty anymore. So I recrafted and put all of the stonework, like cobblestones, and all of the patterning into the top of this bonsai. And that, to me, all of those stones, and there's, there'd be over 60 as an example on top of the bonsai. All of the little, just like like Rundle Mall used to be with the pavers and those sorts of things. And that is very much a great representation of my life. There's been some big rocks, as you said, some significant moments and some significant elements, but it's all the little ones that lead to the bigger ones that have made the difference. yes, there's some certainly repeating patterns and some very big themes for me, which are the big rocks. So business development, marketing, growth,
Yeah.
and, adventure. Adventure's clearly one of my things. So they're the big rocks, but there's been lots of smaller rocks around those that contribute to some of the bigger insights.
It sounds like you've been living a life of lots of aha moments where you're doing something that suddenly triggers something else, and it's changed your perspective on things. Would that be a reasonable way of putting it?
Yeah, I always describe my life as having been very serendipitous. If I look at the work that I do now, that came about because one of my mentors said to me, as you said in the intro, "For God's sake, Sally, you've got enough content, to write 6 books." Now I wrote 2 books and then did nothing with it. But that insight of the ability to turn something into something else was something I used 8 years down the track for a friend, where I created some of that bite-sized content. And then, I did it for a few other people. And then I got asked again. By this time, I'm starting to think serendipitously, could this actually be a thing? I didn't know. So a lot of the work that I do and the life that I live has been serendipitously delivered through. I've been, one of my favorite quotes is, "When the student is ready, the teacher appears." For me, when I'm ready to, see something and take it forward, it appears.
Hmm. It actually makes an interesting question there, which I'm just sort of framing in my mind is there's some skills that you've got innate skills, but but when do you reckon you started to realise what you're good at and what made you a bit different to others, and gave you a sense of, hey, this is me and this is the me I want to keep pushing?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go back to the, oh my God, what has influenced me, to me, and I curled up in a fetal position in tears when I was trying to unpack the meaning of that for me, I found that very incredibly difficult because I didn't really know who I was and what I did. I just did it. And lots of people are in that space, we just did it. For me, what made that next step easier was I'd done a number of different, and I love profiling tools, but I'd done a number of profiling tools, and one of them in particular really nailed how to articulate the elements of what I did. Um, I maximize things. I can see how dots join together. I can strategically lay something out. I can see something that's good and make it better. All those sorts of things. Those elements are actually part of the Strengths Finder profile. But it wasn't until I read it when somebody articulated it and I went, "Oh my God, that's exactly what I do." Was it that I was able to actually see it? So I needed to be shown it to be able to see it for myself. And that comes down to the aspect of the work again that I do with people that, we can't read our own labels sitting inside our own jar.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I did instinctively, and I didn't value it because it was so easy and effortless for me. So something that's effortless for us is often highly valued by somebody else, and vice versa.
Yes, that's a saying that's grown on me over the time I first heard you say that, you can't see yourself from inside the bottle. You don't really know how others see it till they tell you, and you suddenly go, "Oh gosh, I didn't realise that." Yeah, it's sort of, for instance, in my case, it was a bit different insofar as I knew what I was good at in my personal life, and suddenly opportunity arose to turn it into a working life. And of course, my attitude was straight away, that's what I want to do. But there was a definite, big gap between one and the other. But it seems to me that another thing that's been happening to you from what you've said, purpose has found you. People have sort of said to you, I think of the one that we quoted what I read about you was the idea, look, for God's sake, yes, Sally, you've got enough there to write a book. And suddenly that opened up some doors to you that you hadn't quite realised. Suddenly that triggered where you were going. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I would go back again to a personal development, seminar I attended, because I was certainly a seminar junkie for a long period of time. And that was, we were always taught to be resourceful. And my mum was resourceful, from a budgeting perspective as it related to the way in which she cooked and the way in which she ran the home. So and I am incredibly resourceful. That's why I repurpose content. So I can see something and go, oh, if I just add this to it and just add that to it. If I look at the costume that I've just made for the dance thing that I'm doing, I found a skirt and then I went, oh, I can use that t-shirt and I can rip the t-shirt there and I can add that to it. So I'm resourceful and thrifty. Another reason why my clients like me, because we get a lot of longevity out of that. But I do have that innate ability to be resourceful, which was a skill that was taught to me again very early in life of how to maximize and leverage stuff. So, and I do that in a lot of areas of my life. Does that answer your question?
Mm. And that's a skill you probably always knew you had. I suppose it was just a question, about of being able to sort of being resourceful, of being able to look through a situation and see possibilities. That's not something that was never an aha moment, I don't think.
No. I've always had, one or two things and seen how I can turn it into four or five things. Finding pieces of wood and bricks and stuff to make jumps for when I had the horses. You might not have had, beautiful jumps, but we could create jumps again from being resourceful of what was around the paddock or out the back sort of thing. So I always had that ability to find and utilize elements.
Yeah, given we're talking about, well, I've used the expression second half of life, and it's one I'm quite open about because I'd be interested to know, is there in your existence, well, from what you're saying, there's not really a first and second half of life. It's more to do with where you realised what your life was all about, where you really felt, and that's probably even in fairly recent years where you sort of come to an absolute, this is what I really love doing, or has that always been with you, say from your 20s onwards, when you first became a bums on seats lady and all these things? These were fairly steady progressions in your life.
Yeah, they were very, I suppose, steady progressions. I could still be the bums on seats girl. I could still be the marketing coach. I could still be all of those. I just choose not to be now because I will tend to adapt and move where the market needs me. That's part of being resourceful. You're also an opportunist. So you go where the service is needed. So I mean that from a serving perspective. I think the first half of my life was more about creating an income and maintaining a household. And doing all those sorts of things, where now it's I still got to do all those things, but if I don't like doing it and don't enjoy doing it, I don't do it. It's probably also why I didn't stay in employment very, very long a lot of the time, or I always had a side hustle because I always had a backup plan. If they annoyed the crap out of me, I was gone. I also changed jobs a lot when I was employed. And I also ended up in disruptive, slightly more disruptive roles from an advocacy perspective in the roles of when I was working. When I worked for the government, I got asked to be the union rep, which was not my thing from a political sense of things, but from an advocacy and standing up for those that didn't want to stand up for themselves. That was a role that I ended up in. So, I've always had something on the side, because if someone annoys me or I don't like it anymore, I will take a huge leap of faith and jump.
What went through your mind, Sally, when you decided you were going to go into your own business rather than being an employee? I think there was a fairly significant stage there where you had been working for various organisations and then decided you could set up your own business.
Well, I suppose really I've had my own business of one form or another from 11 onwards. So I've really always have had a business on the side. I've never not had something on the side as well as working. So for me, it was really around, okay, is this the thing that gives me the opportunity to do this full time? And that came about through the speaking, the coaching, and then obviously creating the agency that we have now. So that I suppose really is the typical service-based entrepreneur's journey.
It sounds, your life's been more it hasn't been it hasn't been a sprint or a lot of sprints. It's been a evolution marathon sort of, and just continuously evolving. I'd like to throw to you for your reaction at some of the old traditional fallacies that I've been promoting. The idea that we reach and it's been commonly believed, we get to a stage around 50 where there's a bell curve, which we reach a height and then it's a gradual downhill slide. That sort of thinking. Uh, how have you treated and dealt with that sort of? Have you just simply snubbed your nose at it? What's been your reaction to the idea, which has been very commonly held, that we all once you get to 50 or so, you're too old to work and we've had enough, and just go away and watch the world go by. Clearly not your case.
No,
Comment.
and I think for me, from an entrepreneur's perspective, we don't have a retirement schedule, or an end of working career schedule like you do if you're actually an employee or if you're in the corporate space. So as an entrepreneur, you control the game plan. So for me, there's never really been an end date with that. It's just like, okay, what will I be next? What will I grow up into next? So I don't think there's really been an end date. As a perceived outside influencing end date, do I have my own end date? Probably. I haven't decided yet.
Yeah, I think it's probably more a question of whether you are self-employed or an employee to some extent. I think employees sort of feel like they have to wrestle with the idea: is this what it's all about? And how long do I keep going for? And and will it be a great rest? So yeah, we're the self-employed, and having now had my foot in both camps, probably more in the employed than the self-employed role. Yes, I am as an advocate after 40 odd years in government of saying, no, I never want to retire. I want to keep on going. So I think the self-employed bit, the following the passion, is quite a significant factor in deciding what life's really all about.
Yeah. And for me, if I really look back, as it relates to when I was in my probably late 30s, probably late 30s, going into the marketplace in the role as business development or marketing person and trying to find a job as such, I was too old, too overqualified, and no one would employ me. The only roles I could get were the very early ones, because they didn't have to pay me a whole lot. So I actually struggled in that period of my life. I found it difficult to find, I'll call it, rewarding employment. And as a result, chose, not to play that game because they didn't want me anyway. So, the feisty ferret had come out and was like, well, stuff you, I'm just going to go, I'll just go make my own path, which is what I did.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about, late 30s. Mine was 36, and I'm dealing with a person at the moment who's 38. I sometimes think it is more to do with when you've been in a work job for probably 15 years or so. That's when you really start to reflect on, is this what I really want to do for the rest of my life? In my case, it was more 35 more years and then a gold watch, and that's it, because I was in government employment job. So I think perhaps it might be, I'm actually getting the idea that perhaps the late 30s is a fairly significant stage in our life, not whatever we're doing. I was interested, the previous person I interviewed said midlife's about 60 to 70, which is perhaps an interesting concept too. And clearly, I don't even need to ask you about this word retirement, because it really is, I think, in everybody's minds, including employees, retirement is something like, we still think of it as retirement from life rather than retirement for work, and nobody wants to retire from life. But we're looking, but that's, look, I think that's, now, I guess the other thing, and I'm conscious of something you've said before too, Sally, is life after 50 or therefore, and I think this is particularly the case with women, start to see life very differently, starting to recognise, and I think I remember you saying something like, you don't really quite care anymore what people think and say about you. And I read quite a bit in articles in the papers about women who are now proud of the fact that they've passed 50. What's your comments on life evolution from the second half of life from that point of view?
Yeah. It's actually interesting. I think for women, when they sort of hitting that 50 mark, that there's changes in kids. There's changes as far as kids moving out of home, and you're sort of that empty nester type scenario. We've often not with partners anymore, and those sorts of things. For me, I honestly, I don't know what clicked over in my mind, but I just suddenly, I just had, and I was talking to Gary Edwards about this. It was just like, we just got to the point we just didn't care. We just went, well, I'm going to do it this way because that's the way I enjoy doing it. And we just had, I'm not sure whether it's we lost the bravado or we just created our own bravado. We just stepped into that's probably more to the point. I see women just stepping into, they're all of their requirements and requested elements that request their time have slid away, and now they're sort of rising into their own space. And I think they rise with vengeance or gusto or enthusiasm or whatever, and that seems to happen at that space where we just get to a point where we just go, stuff it, I'm just going to own this. Let's just move forward. And it is literally a bit of a switch. I can't explain it, but I see it a lot in the clients I work with and my friends, where all of a sudden you just get to that point and it just.
Yeah. I think the other side of this too is that as kids we're playful and we just live for the moment, etc. I tend to think that once we get into and I'll put it as plus the 50 over age group, that's sort of thinking from there on, the idea of being a kid again and bringing out the child within you and the playfulness is something that becomes more accepted. I'll dress a bit differently. I'll act a bit differently. I won't worry so much because I never did as a child. So there's almost a next part in going back. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think we do. We lose the requirements that are attached to us, and we do absolutely get back into that playful state, and we do become more childlike and more kid-like. And I see that in myself very much, and I see that with the friends that I have around me. We just sort of we kick back and we do naughty kid things again, and I love it.
Yeah, I wrote it way back years ago. I wrote a poem, "I Want to Be a Kid Again," where once you leave work, and you can live in the moment. You don't have to worry about a mortgage so much. You don't have to worry about this or that, and you just make up friendships with people. Off you go, and it's sort of just thinking like a child again. So yeah, but that's a healthy one. That's one that I think that's right. We're probably one other question I'd like to ask. You're doing a series of interviews lately on legacy. At what point in our lives do you reckon we start to think in terms of wanting to leave a legacy?
I think there's I think there's probably two or three versions to that. I see men early when their kids are young, creating a legacy as it relates to what they're doing and how they are as a human, creating a legacy for their kids from that perspective. I think when you get into your business, you're getting into business to serve. So you're sort of crafting a legacy from that perspective, from a service perspective. And then a third one that I see, which are a lot of the clients that I work with that have, had very full lives. They've created a lot of wealth, and now they're providing and giving back. So there's sort of the creation and the standards, or not the standards, but the creation of the values and the humanness, and then there's the quest, which is sort of a little bit more income driven, but service based. And then there's I've done all of that. I've created all of that. Now I just want to really just amp up the giving back. And that's what I refer to the legacy leavers, where they know what they stand for, they know who they serve, and now they're just providing and supporting them in any way and in every way they can, and it's not financially driven anymore. So I think there's that values-based creation, legacy creation, and as it relates to the family union and what they want to instill. And then there's that income quest-related stuff where you're still coming from your purpose and your passion, but you are still requiring an income and seeking your own income. And then there's that total give back. So there's 3 stages to legacy.
Yes, I guess it's when the priorities start to shift. Uh, like, as you say, if money's a big issue in your life, then that is the big issue. But if as the years go by, you start to think more bigger picture stuff than that, then the door is at least open to start thinking about legacy that you might want to leave. I mean, I'm thinking a clear comparison is probably a person at 20 and a person at 70 have got very different perspectives or regard the word legacy. If the 20-year-old probably doesn't even think of legacy, but I'm not certain quite when that happens. And I think it's a fairly interesting indicator of depth of age, depth, as we age. Is
Age and
thinking about.
experience, I'd say, with that, because I'm working with, I'm going to call him a young guy. He's probably in his early, maybe mid 30s. He's created a lot of success for himself, and it was him that made me reflect on the values that he's instilling into his young children. But he's actually he's, as I said, only in his 30s, but because he's had a lot of success and a lot of financial success and a lot of success helping other people be incredibly successful. He is actually already at that the legacy leaver stage, but he's only in his 30s. So I think it depends on how you've gone about crafting your life and how quickly you wanted to move through. But he is very much a legacy leaver. So I don't necessarily think a legacy leaving is always an age measurement. In his case, I suppose it's success and service measurement.
You've got to have a sense too of a legacy that there is a legacy you want to leave. And it can be as simple as, look, I looked after my family and brought the family up very well, and my legacy is that the children are well established in their lives and doing the right thing, and that's the legacy I want to leave. Versus the legacy says, look, I've made some sort of a difference in the world, and I believe there's a legacy there I would like to leave behind. The word legacy can have a lot of meanings depending on where you're at in life and what's important to you,
Mm.
and big picture stuff.
And I was just going to say, if I look at, from a legacy perspective, from an everyday legacy perspective, there was a teacher at Rory's school that recognised he was struggling with something, that one of his subjects, that really helped him, that completely turned his world around and made a positive impact. Now that was a teacher doing his job, but just was doing his job really well and noticed. So, he's left a legacy of education that turned Rory's life around. So, we all have our legacy leaving moments. It's not necessarily a great big thing that happens at the end. We can have those touch points where we change somebody's life through some form of service. So.
It's the opposite of what not hoping you don't want to leave life with regrets. It's two different trains of thinking. One, very much contributing, the other one, a sort of a grieving sort of process. But and I think the legacy one is so important that we feel like we've left something behind a little better than when we came. Is such a good thought. Sally, we're getting a bit down to the end now. I guess I just want to throw you a little bit, get a reaction from you about this word, the difference between age and old. We're all aging, but and you've heard me use the thing about a tree. It doesn't get old; it becomes significant. Where you're at in your life? How do you look ahead in terms of the question of aging versus old?
If someone tells me that I'm old, and Rory did this on the weekend, I'm like to smash them one. So that's purely because I don't feel like I'm old. And I don't even think that I am the age that I am. I often have to catch myself. And that comes back to the fact that I've got that very, very strong adventurous spirit. I think you saw on social media that Rory went to the Foam Fest, and I didn't get an invite. And when I tackled him about it in jest, he said, "Because you would have slowed me down." And it was like, how rude. They had 7-year-olds there and you didn't take me because I'd slow you down. Which was true. I would have slowed him down because he's faster than me. But I do have to stop and remember that, I might not be as agile as I'd like to think my superhero body is, but sometimes it's not. So I don't see myself as aging. I know I am, and I don't see myself as old.
Mhm.
And I'm definitely not.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes my legacy is just that I imagine I'm still here at 85. You know, if people sort of tell me, that's great. And I think, well, that's not a bad legacy in itself, whatever else happens. So I'm quite happy doing that. Sally, I think any parting thoughts that you might, for instance, any comments you'd like to make to people under 30, about what the future looks like in terms of a possible second half of life or later years?
Yeah, I just think really look inwards, get to understand who you are, what you love to do, and what your values are. So, one of my mentors said to me very early on, Sally, stop studying strategy. Study yourself 95% of the time, and strategies 5% of the time. Because when you know who you are and what you stand for and what your values are, you can actually say yes and no to the right and wrong things very quickly and easily. And find peace and happiness.
That's a fascinating percentage. The idea of what percent of you of your time are you the real you, and what percentage of your time are you role playing to some extent? It's probably it could be interesting to get a poll on that. I think that if people are honest, that is, I think that's an interesting fact. Sally, it's been fascinating interviewing, and much as I know you, it's just beautiful to get some of those insights from you. And I shall be poring over this I'm doing 6 of these interviews. I want to get a whole range of perspectives. Already I've had 2 different perspectives, apart from my own. And the others, of course, are very different to mine. So I think it's valuable that we learn. There is a lot more to this 50 plus than people have given traditionally thinking about. And I think one of the problems, of course, is the public perceptions might still be back in the 20th century. They change slower than individual thinking. We can all have our definite ideas. But Sally, before we close, would you like to tell people a little bit about where they can, what your title, where they can find you, and who your ideal client is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I am on all social media channels under Sally A. Curtis, but the easiest one to connect with me is on LinkedIn. My website is sallyacurtis.biz, B-I-Z. And yeah, always up to have a good human chat with people. Part of my adventurous spirit is also being incredibly curious about people. So always love to have a quick conversation. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sal. It's been a pleasure interviewing, and I wish you luck with more global awards.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sally.
Great pleasure, Peter. Thank you.
And that's a wrap. I hope you found this discussion to be of value to you. And until next time, make sure you enjoy being you.